Hey guys, it's M4J here, and welcome back to the M4J network here on OpenTTD. Today we are going overground. I think there will be an episode in the future where we go underground, but right now we are working on the Gardcity OverGround network. And to begin with, I wasn't actually sure how many new services we'd be adding to the network in this week's episode. As you know, there wasn't an episode last week. I'll be honest, I'm starting to run out of ideas in some regards. There are big projects I would like to work on, but not necessarily have the time to do. There are lots and lots of route overview and station overview videos on the way as well. The delay on those right now is not having as much time as I'd like to edit them. They do take a long time. They take days rather than hours, which is something I'm not particularly used to. But I've recorded, I think, 50 different routes. Some are reverse journeys of routes that we've already seen. Some are the same routes that we've already seen, but different services. But the idea is to try and create a path, like a journey through the network. So we started at GSJ, went down to Denston, then all the way across to Sunnington, then into Gardcity at GSMI, then we went from GSP down to Munfingford, and that's where we ended. So the next episode is going to be Munfingford, just an overview of Munfingford. Then the episode after that is going to be Munfingford to GSMA. And then from there, actually it looks like it's going to be Munfingford to GSMA. There's a poll actually up on my community page at the moment if you want to vote on that. Basically, I'm going to get 2 videos from Munfingford, and then by the time I've finished editing both, I'm going to have a look at the poll. Whichever route is in the lead, that's the one that's going to be chosen. And then from, to create contingency there, I've got routes from GSMA and Denton and Drentbourne and Bath City, and basically that's where we start sort of spreading out all across the network. And the idea is each journey will follow on from the previous one in some way. So for example, if we take a train into Gardcity, we took a train into GSMI, the next episode was from GSP, and it kind of mentions the fact we've just hopped from one station to the other. As I said, though, those do take time. I'm trying to find a way to refine the process to make it a little bit quicker. But for now, at least, those episodes do take time. And I'm going to try and have like 4 or 5 queued up. And they're going to be put up on the channel every other week anyway. So that should fill the gap to allow me to edit some more. But yeah, the main series, I was running on ideas until I started looking at the overground network around Gardcity. And I suddenly realised there's an opportunity here. Because there's a lot of empty track, shall we say. There's a lot of routes that have been built and have been built for quite some time but have no trains running on them. So I thought, why not do something about that? So that's what this episode is. We are reintroducing the Gardcity OverGround. There's a new livery for the trains. It's very, very, very similar to the M4J rail livery, but there are some subtle differences which you may or may not notice. We're using class 313s. The reason I'm using these is because they're pretty commuter based. They're also quite old and rattly, although in this time frame that we're in, for those of you new to this network is set in sort of the early to mid 90s. That's why we have things like the 373s. It's like 94, 95-ish we're based. So the 313s weren't that old and rattly. I mean, they were rattly, but they weren't old back in the 90s. They've always been rattly. As far as I'm aware, every time I went into London on one of these things, they bumped and jumped everywhere. But I love them. That's the thing. Someone asked me again recently what my favourite train was, and it's still the networkers. But the 313s, I am starting to miss seeing. They weren't the most pleasant to ride on, don't get me wrong, but it's just, it's like the Pacers. They have a love-hate relationship with their passengers, where some people were genuinely sad to see them go. And I was genuinely sad to see the 313s go off the Great Northern routes. They weren't the best by any stretch, but they're going to be missed for sure. But anyway, before I get teary-eyed, let's go back to what the episode's about. We're going to be using 313s, mainly for their dual voltage, but also because they do fit the bill as a like passenger carrying commuter style train, so there'll be more passengers standing than seated, things like that. I've created and got a Gardcity OverGround livery for all 3 variants of the 313s. One thing I am tempted to do is use a little bit of artistic license and create a 3rd or 4th variant, I should say, of the 313s that have dual voltage but no speed limiter on the 3rd rail electrification. The reason being is some of the outer stretches of the overground network can reach speeds of up to 50 miles an hour, but because of the trains I'm using at the moment, it's always capped at 30. Some of the overhead electrified sections can reach 50, but because in real life the 313s had electrical limiters on, when they were travelling through the tunnels between Drayton Park and Moorgate, that's been reflected in the game because, you know, realism, which is something that I myself coded in. Quite proud of that, actually. But yeah, because of that, it can be a little bit limiting, and I got my variants the wrong way around to begin with. So you'll see me adding variants for overhead electrification that aren't. They're third rail only, and you'll also see me add in variants for what I thought were dual voltage but turned out to be overhead electrification only. That has now been fixed. There were some routing issues as well, which I've also fixed, and I'm happy to report that the train seems to be running quite nicely. I haven't filled the roster yet, so there is a chance that there might be some trains conflicting with one another, but that's by the by. I'm kind of used to that by now. So regarding the services you're seeing, wow, my PC runs slow whilst I'm recording audio. Just trying to get up the service schedules again so I can remind myself what stations are used. So basically there are, I think there's, I'm going off memory here, so I might be wrong. I think there's 3 trains that originate at GSG. I think there's 2 that originate at GSC, maybe 3. There's 3 or 4 that originate from GST, and there's 1 from GSJ. Now there are 2 airport services. One goes from GSG round the loop counterclockwise, anti-clockwise, and terminates at Neffingbourne Springs East. And then there is one that originates at GSJ, runs through the through platforms at GST, and terminates at, is it Safingly, where it connects up with the Western Reaches North line. Both pass through the airports at Great Wintfield, West and East terminals, and they also connect at Cheward. Basically, they join up at Florentine Way from the north and the south, and then they both run west out towards the airport and beyond, and then they separate again at that junction station that I can never remember the name of, a little bit further west from the airport. We've also got, so I've got the list up now. So we've got GSG to GSG, which is the circle line. Now in the past we had one clockwise and one anti-clockwise service. That's now been replaced by a single service that runs, I think it runs anti-clockwise first and then it reverses and runs clockwise. We've got one from GSC, which is Gardcity St Christopher, up to Bunhattan, which is the northern extremity currently of the overground network, and there it joins up with that little branch line from GSMA. We've also got one from GSC that runs to Plinhill, which is the junction station where the underground and overground meet, sort of to the southwest of Great Wintfield Airport. Then we've got a service from GST that runs to Slanningwell West, which is sort of one of, but despite the name, it's one of the southeastern extremities of the network. It connects up with the southeastern mainline, Gardcity Southeastern mainline out of GSMA. I think 1 or 2 stations before Slanningwell West. Then we got another service from GST to Dimpole East, which uses that U-shaped branch that we built. That must have been like 2.5-3 years ago I built that line. Now that's quite scary. And then we got GSJ to Flaham Junction, which uses the DC lines that run alongside the West Winds line. Then we got GSG to Neffingbourne. It is Neffingbourne, I knew I was right. Springs West, and that's the one I was just talking about. Then we got GSJ down to Safingly. And then finally we got GST to Plarfingburg, which actually runs via Guard Square, Gardcity St Bartholomew. That is the first time that we have an outer service that isn't part of the Network Central franchise that actually connects to Guard Square. So that's now, it's now possible for passengers to transfer between GST, GSJ, GSG, GSC, GSMA, GSMI, and GSP to GSB via the overground, and that then connects up with the underground at, I want to say, Slondinghead Lakeside, and I'm probably wrong, and then it continues east to Plarfingburg, and that also connects up with the Winston branch of the Gardcity Great Eastern line at Sinbridge. There is plenty of potential for more. I would like to do a GSG to Woodside route, and I would also like to do a Woodside to Slendstone route. The Slendstone one is probably going to be easier to do, and that might actually be there instead of the GSG to Woodside one. Because basically Woodside and Slendstone both have terminus facilities, turnback facilities, and neither of them are being used currently. There's also the possibility of doing a GSG to Renston interchange using overhead electrification only. And then once the second overground branch through GSB is complete, there'll be trains obviously running on that as well. And there might even be some cross-city ones. So there might be, for example, Plinhill to Bunhattan, that kind of thing. I don't know how possible that's going to be to actually do, but I might look into it because you never know. Anyone who's downloaded the route and has seen some other potential routes, do let me know. There is also the possibility of running, for example, Flaham down to Buntbourne Parkway. So I think right now Buntbourne Parkway it is part of the Gardcity Connect map, but I don't think there's a service plan to terminate there right now. Because what I might do, there was originally going to be one, but I think what I might do with that is instead run it between... I think it was the one from Hoddingville was supposed to run down and terminate at Buntbourne, but I might actually make that go as far as Munfingford instead, in which case there's the Bay platform at Buntbourne that's now free. So I might make that an overground service and have that run from Flaham, and then it will use the Guard Lake connection. Or it could, from Flaham, it could branch off and go through... Actually, no, it can't. Actually, it can't, because of the way that's set up. Okay, that might end up being a Gardcity Connect line again. We will see. There's also, of course, terminus platforms at Shoreham Central. No, Shoreham Junction. Shoreham Central's on the HLR. Shoreham Junction. There is potential for a terminus service there as well. But yeah, I'm kind of spitballing ideas out loud right now. Speaking of the HLR, that is also going to be the subject of a future video, whether it's just a highlights thing or whether it's a full rework. I'm not going to change the services themselves too much, the current ones at least, but there's a new livery that I want to design that's going to incorporate the Hatfield town colours into the trains, because that's what it's all based on at the end of the day anyway. And I will also maybe add an extra service or two. There's a kind of idea I've had in my head, and it was suggested by George, to extend the line north of Leyhill, or east of Leyhill, like extend it from Leyhill up into I'm trying to remember, I think Plintbridge Parkway might have been suggested. I might have to go back and reread those. George, if you're watching, remind me where it was that you suggested, because I did like the idea. It just wasn't feasible at the time. But since I'm in the realms now of looking for new ideas, I think anything's on the table again and could potentially be used. Right. Rail news then. So we're talking about Gardcity Overground, and Gardcity Overground, of course, is based on the London Overground network. Now, London Overground in recent years has been pretty consistent in terms of its operations. Obviously, the Gospel Oak to Barking line was electrified a couple of years ago, and the new, is it 710s? 720s? 710s? I want to say 710s. The new Aventra trains, which are but ugly to look at, but apparently are quite nice to ride on, have been introduced at last after, nearly 2 years of delays. You know how I feel about the Aventras. If you don't, I don't think they're very good. I think they're a bit overrated, and I think every company's ordered one despite the fact they don't bloody work properly. And there was nothing wrong with the trains that they replaced. Anyway, so they've been in service now for a year or so proper. I think it was September 2019 they came in. And they ran that free week or free month. I think it was free month. September 2019 was a free month for all travellers on the Gospel Oak to Barking line to compensate for the fact that they botched it big time. But now they've been in for a year or so now. Things have been pretty consistent. However, since we mentioned the Gospel Oak to Barking line, there is an extension currently being built between Barking and Barking Riverside. Now, Barking Riverside is a brand new station. It doesn't exist on the map already. As the name suggests, it's on the banks of the Thames. I think it's the Thames. It might be a tributary of the Thames. But it's on the bank of the river. And it's actually a pretty big deal in many ways. There are 2 stations planned, one currently being built. There is another station planned halfway between Barking and Barking Riverside, or roughly halfway. But the new extension is to serve a new residential area that's being built. Residential, commercial, as London continues to develop. The station itself looks awesome. I think it looks really, really cool. Most of the line is elevated between Barking and Barking Riverside, and Barking Riverside itself is actually built elevated as well. There are also plans to potentially extend the line south across the river from Barking Riverside as far as Abbey Wood, but there's also plans to extend the DLR in that direction as well. So I think one or the other would get built. Personally, I'd quite like to see the overground be extended down first and connect up with Crossrail, and then maybe the DLR being extended as well under the river, and then interchange at Abbey Wood as well. I think Abbey Wood can become quite a big interchange station in the future, because Abbey Wood is also one of these areas where it's one of these stations. It's currently the southeastern terminus for Crossrail, but there are plans to extend Crossrail further into places like Ebbsfleet, which I think is a good idea. Maybe even to Ashford International, which again I think is a good idea, because if you've got Crossrail going out to Heathrow and Reading, why not have it go to places like Ashford International? And people coming in on the train from Paris who get off at Ashford, once Eurostar services begin calling at Ashford again, can change to a Crossrail train and go direct to central London and not have to go on a southeastern train to Charing Cross. They can just go straight to places like Farringdon and travel onwards from there. Or better yet, go straight to Heathrow. It's a long journey, sure, right the way across central London, stopping at every station, but it's an option, and that's the thing. It's about giving people options as well as giving people connections. So the overground is continuing to expand, and there are also 2 new stations planned to connect with Old Oak Common when the it is Crossrail, and High Speed 2 station gets built. Again, big fan of that. They're not direct connections, and they're both on separate branches, so one's on the West London line, one's on the North London line, and they're kind of built on 2 sides of the triangular junction there. But again, it's about connections. You know, that it'll probably be connector blobs and walking lines on the map, but I think it's better than rerouting the overground lines to actually run directly past Old Oak Common. They're literally like 5-10 minute walk, maybe 20 max. So I think, you know, it's worth doing. Plus, there's a need for stations there anyway, I feel, because if you've got residential areas and you don't have a station that's that close, you should be building a station that's closer. Let's put it that way. So there's a lot of changes happening with the overground now. There are also lots of changes happening with the underground. Some of them have sort of slid under the radar. So the obvious one is the Northern Line extension down to Battersea Power Station. But there's also rebuilding work going on at Bank, which I think has been featured in this channel before, but I'm directly referencing Jeff Marshall's videos, as I always do. So Bank is being expanded for capacity reasons. I think it's to do with... Actually, is it? No, I don't think it's to do with the Northern Line extension, because it's on the wrong branch. It's the Charing Cross branch that goes down to Battersea, or most of the Charing Cross branch. Some do terminate at Kennington still. But basically, the old platforms at Bank weren't really wide enough. So the old northbound platform has been filled in and is going to become a wider southbound platform. And then there's a new northbound platform and running tunnel. I think this is right. It might be southbound, actually. There's a new running tunnel being built anyway, and a new platform. And the old platform is being filled in, or one of the tracks is being filled in to create a wider platform there. It's similar to what they've done at Angel, what they did at Angel many, many years ago now. Anyone who's wondered why there's one platform that's really, really wide at Angel, it's because it used to be 2 platforms and now it's 1. I like the fact that they can do this. It's a long project. It's taken a couple of years at least to actually do. But I can see more stations getting rebuilt like this, particularly on the Northern Line, because it is one of the oldest subsurface lines in London. So some of the old platforms, Clapham Common and Clapham North, I think are the only 2 island platforms left on the Northern Line. And if you look at them, they're really, really, really narrow. So I could see potentially they might get rebuilt next, particularly if the Northern Line extension does in the future get extended down to Clapham Junction. There might be scope to include the rebuild of Clapham North and Clapham Common in that project. They're on separate branches. They don't directly connect with each other or anything. But because they're all within the area of Clapham, they might become part of the same project. Who knows? But yeah, TfL are doing a lot of good things right now. TfL are also doing a lot of bad things, but they're doing a lot of good things. Crossrail is kind of... It's coming. I think they are back on schedule now, or at least on their new schedule that they announced last year or the year before. Can't actually remember now. But yeah, it's coming. It is coming. And once Crossrail's open, lockdown hopefully will have been lifted by then. And I'm actually going to go check it out and see it for myself, because I'm an adult now and I can go to London and travel on trains if I so wish. And I'm really sort of excited about that, because it'll be my first big adventure. It'll probably be my first big adventure on trains since lockdown started. And that's, well, for me at least, that's pretty much a year ago. I think the last time I left the house proper, besides job interviews and things like that, was February 2020, and that was for a careers fair at the uni. I'm trying to remember which week it was. I think it was like the 3rd or 4th week of February. That was one of my last things I did with XVI as well. And since then, not really been out much. A few 20-minute trips here and there, and that's it. So yeah, we're all going a little bit stir crazy. Hopefully this lockdown will be lifted soon. Not going to go too political with this, but you know, I think some of the right decisions now have finally been made, which is good. And once again, I implore you all, I'm trying to remember where I left my magazine, I implore you all to stay safe as you can. You know, follow the rules basically. No one's above the law. Stay safe, and we'll all be out of this as soon as possible. Right, to change subject again, we're going to go talk about the latest rail news, because there are some exciting developments happening in the rail world. First of all, High Speed 2. Now, there's a whole page in my magazine devoted to High Speed 2. I'm just trying to find it. It is somewhere. Basically, Royal Ascent. Where is it? I'm trying to remember. Royal Ascent for High Speed 2 crew extension. So it looks like it's all happening now. It's all still up in the air a little bit, because protesters are getting involved, and there's petitions, and there's legal action being taken. But it looks like High Speed 2 is actually going to go ahead. And as with everything, there's always going to be a critic. There's always going to be someone complaining. There's always going to be someone who pitches an idea that may or may not actually be better, but they think is better. Me personally, as you know, I think High Speed 2 is a necessity. I think the doors that it can unlock are immense. The fact that if we do in the future connect High Speed 2 and High Speed 1, then we have a high-speed rail network that connects with France, Germany, Denmark, Spain, Italy, Switzerland, Austria, Hungary. Why would you not do it? If you want to get planes out of the sky, that's how you do it. You've got to put in an equivalent. It looks like High Speed 2 will still be 350 kilometers per hour running. It might not be to begin with, but I imagine they'll slowly build it up. So Royal Ascent has been given for the crew extension. I'm looking at an artist's impression of crew station. It kind of looks like a mix of 1960s meets 2010. Now, it's a lot of glass and steel, but there's a lot of concrete as well. It does look quite nice. There's a lot of raised flower beds, which look very nice. I'm actually starting to become more of a fan of foliage around railway stations now. It's Madrid, isn't it? The old railway station in Madrid. The old train shed is now a botanical gardens. I think that's a really, really genius way of reusing an old station building. Don't just turn it into offices. Make it part of the new station. I think Gare du Nord is something similar as well. The old station building is now like a gardens area. Really, really clever. We should do that more often as well, rather than just knocking buildings down. Anyway, High Speed 2. There's also, I think I mentioned this recently, I think last month in fact, that the eastern leg has been safeguarded. That doesn't mean it's going to go ahead, but it means that the route has been safeguarded so that if it does go ahead, they don't have to purchase property and land and things like that, because they've already built across where the tracks were going to go. The one thing I don't like about the plan is there's a series of viaducts where I think both lines run separately. In fact, I think I have... I need to start bookmarking pages in these magazines, because I always forget which page. Literally as I say that, I turn to the right page. Water Orton Delta Junction Viaducts, it's called. And I think it's where one of the legs of the triangle that goes to Birmingham is going to be. And it's these two concrete viaducts that each carry, I believe, a single track. They might carry double track. So... there's a line that heads west towards Birmingham, and there's the main line that continues heading north towards Crewe and beyond. It's built over sort of marshland and things like that. Now, the one thing I don't like is the look of these bridges. I think if you're building something across open marshland, you need to kind of try and disguise the a little bit more. And these are quite brutal-looking concrete viaducts. So you've got to juggle cost-effectiveness versus aesthetics. And I think that this is one of those areas where aesthetics needed to perhaps be the priority first, and then looking at the cost effectiveness. I do think they look quite ugly, and I've always followed the argument of eyesores. When you're building these big projects, you've got to make them look nice as well. You've got to make them fit, otherwise they just look butt ugly, absolutely horrible, and you're not going to win anyone over with that. There's archaeological digs going on at the moment as well, which I think is also important. It's one of the things that Crossrail was good for as well, was archaeological digs in and around London. And there's a design that's been revealed for Euston Tunnel access, which is blue brick, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I suppose it doesn't look too bad. Arguments for the High Speed 2 East leg to continue. As you know, I think all legs should be built, but not all these junctions that were proposed in the past, because I still think they're a little bit dumb. And the Old Oak crossover box. So as we swing back round towards the overground, the Old Oak crossover box has construction has actually begun now. So this is where trains will come into Old Oak Common. Some I think are actually planned to terminate there rather than continuing to run into Euston. And in fact, I think the Old Oak station is going to be the original terminus before Euston is completed. So that's actually, I think, the first sort of big dig that's happening to show that to show that High Speed 2 is actually happening. I think I've been calling it Crossrail all this time. I meant High Speed 2. 130 metre long underground box where this junction is. That's massive when you think about it. And yet trains still have to slow down to 62 miles an hour to be able to switch tracks. It's the same as 50. The box itself is the same size as 55 Olympic-sized swimming pools. That is just crazy when you think about it. Absolutely crazy. And hopefully they make it look nicer than they did at Stratford International, because that station is awful to look at. Believe me, it is awful to look at. Right. That pretty much does it for this video, guys. There is lots more news to cover. I'm going to cover more news next week and the week after, because I think I'm going to start doing that more often as well. Rather than like bundling it all onto you in the first episode of the month, I'm going to kind of spread it out a little bit more, because it gives us more to talk about too. If there's any news that you'd like me to discuss, feel free to comment down below. If there's anything you've disagreed with that I've said today, feel free also to comment down below. It's a debate, not an argument. And besides all that, guys, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and of course if you're enjoying the series, drop some comments down below with ideas for future episodes. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button. If you have already subscribed to the channel, thank you guys for your continued support, and until next time, I will see you soon.